Hello there everyone, and welcome back to Canine Cannibalism. Today we are going to be taking a look at The Ecstasy of Agony by Rath James White. The book is 244 pages broken up into 10 stories and 7 poems. We are going to be doing all of the normal things in this video. I will be giving you a content sample, a list of all of the bad things that happen in the book, not explicitly stated, but just a list of all of the bad things, kind of like a trigger warning, a little more robust. I will be doing a spoiler-free review and ratings of the different stories. I'll be giving you a blurb, I'll be giving you a rating out of 10 for each story, and a quick little explanation as to why I rated it that way. After which, I will be doing a full in-depth, spoiler-heavy summary and review of all of the stories, which will be more in depth, talking about specific passages, that kind of thing. And yeah, I think that's it. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around, skip around using the timestamps in the description or on screen, and we're gonna get into it. So, content sample. I'm not doing a content sample of each individual story because that's fucking crazy. We're just gonna do the book as a whole. If you were to pick up a copy of The Ecstasy of Agony and read it, you would find all of the following. You have your bog standard gore, torture, mutilation, and death. And in this book, that does include cannibalism, and genital mutilation. There's also sexual abuse throughout the book, including sexual assault, rape, wound fucking, necrophilic acts, and incest. There's also child abuse in the book, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, and infanticide, and then child death. There is animal abuse in the book, including physical abuse, and there is also animal death. In addition, there's some pretty over-the-top racism in the book. I only include things like racism, homophobia, religious discrimination if they're very pervasive in certain scenes, not just necessarily saying a slur or saying, oh, I hate this group of people. It's very, ingrained in certain scenes of the text. So there's racism in the book. There's also intimate partner abuse. There is addiction of many different forms. And then you have general filth, which in this book does include just a lot of generally filthy scenes. But then there is also some stuff involving menstrual blood and the ingestion of menstrual blood. That's going to be it for your content sample. We are going to get into a spoiler-free review and some quick blurbs for these stories. So it's 17 stories, or rather 10 stories, 7 poems. The first one is titled Beast Mode. I gave it a 5 out of 10. It is just another zombie story, and that's your blurb. It's just another zombie story. There are a few key differences, but it's just another zombie story. That's also your review of that story. It's just another zombie story. There's nothing really to look at and be like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting. It's just another zombie story. The second story in the book is called 99 Cent. I gave it a 3 out of 10. In this story, a guy wishes death on his ex-girlfriend. If only he knew the consequences. The story is meh overall, and it has a very odd, I don't want to say disjointed, but it has a very odd ending that requires you to make a lot of connections that may or may not actually make sense. You're going to see this as a theme with the stories in this book, by the way. There's a lot of issues with a lot of these endings. We'll get to it. The next story is a poem titled Krokodil Fights. Krokodil as in the drug, desomorphine. I gave this one a 7 out of 10. In this poem, rotting crocodile addicts are paid to fight in a ring. If you're unfamiliar with Krokodil, it's synthetic heroin, it's desomorphine. There is an epidemic of it. There was an epidemic of it. I don't know that it's still happening in Russia and surrounding Slavic nations, I believe. Anyway, one of the symptoms of chronic desomorphine use is your skin starts to rot at the scenes of injection. Generally across your body, you develop scales, hence the name Krokodil, like a crocodile. It's not good. don't, you can look up pictures of it if you want. You can find it pretty easy. Give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I wouldn't recommend it if you get queasy easily, but it's a poem, and this was the beginning of me realizing that I don't think I really necessarily like White's poetic style. It feels a little rudimentary, I guess. I guess that's really the only way I can put it. There's a lot of refrains using the same line over again, especially the last line, and repetition in general. And in this poem and in his poems in general, it seems that 2, 3 out of every 5 lines get reused multiple times. It's constant repetition, and I don't necessarily like it very much. Other than that, the story itself in Krokodil Fights I thought was fun. It was cool. It was very violent. It was fun. The next story is called First Person Shooter. It has a 2 out of 10. In this story, 2 guys play a violent video game that begins to bleed into reality. The gore is cool. The story generally is cool. The ending doesn't make a lot of sense. And you know what? It didn't really necessarily need to make a lot of sense, but there's a line in particular that takes it from not making a lot of sense in a fine way to not making a lot of sense in a is the author struggling with theory of mind way. We're going to get into that more in the heavy spoiler review section, so stay tuned if you're interested. The next story is titled 7 Years. It has a 1 out of 10. Every 7 years, our body replaces most of its cells. That's a common, I don't even know, idiom is the correct, I don't think that's the correct word. It's a common phrase. It's a common thing that people say that has kind of some scientific backing from what I know, but not really in the way that it's usually described. Anyway, in the story, the idea is, what if those cells came back? It's definitely not in any way that you're thinking. The story is, it does nothing for me. It's deep in a way that I find to be incredibly fake, and as a concept in the story, it doesn't really make sense. Like, you could have just completely left out the whole 7-year cell thing, and it would have been almost identical, because it's trying to make a statement, and the statement has I'm getting way too close into my deeper reviews and spoilers and stuff. I gotta rein it back a little bit. The next story is a poem. It is titled The Ecstasy of Agony, the namesake of the book. It is a 2 out of 10. It's a poem about a serial killer, or I guess he's implied to be a serial killer. And it's nothing. It's really nothing. There's a couple of interesting I wrote down poetic / rhetorical, and I just tried to say it in one word. Poetic and rhetorical strategies. There are a couple of interesting ones in this poem. Overall, it's not as egregious to me as his other poems. I didn't completely dislike the poetic style in this one, but the poem itself is really nothing to me. So the next story is called Big Game Hunter. I gave it a 7 out of 10. In the story, a man with a traumatic past turns to a very different kind of bear hunting. There's some interesting dialogue. But otherwise, I liked it. I liked the story. Generally, I thought it was fun. It was sleazy. It was cheesy, but it was extreme. I enjoyed it. The next story is called Unsolicited. I gave it a 6 out of 10. In the story, a man sends unsolicited pictures to a girl. What happens next will shock you. On some Darman bullshit. The story's a bit preachy at one point, and I would have appreciated a little bit more sensory detail regarding some of the violence that happens later, but overall, I did enjoy this one. The next story is called Blood-Soaked Savior. It is a 0 out of 10. I am not going to do the disservice of giving you a blurb. It is a political, edgy poem for edge's sake. Political, edgy poem for edge's sake. The story itself could have maybe been interesting if it was done differently, but it reads super edgy, and we'll get into it. The next story is titled Blue and Red. I gave it a 1 out of 10. It is slightly better than Blood-Soaked Savior, but it has the exact same problem. It's less edgy, but it's more just, why the fuck did you write this, really, is what it is. There's a couple of things toward the end that are like a little deeper, a little bit more of like a psychoanalysis of the political fighting in the country, but it's more of a why the fuck did you write this kind of thing. The next story is titled Punk Rock Revenge Porn. It is a 5 out of 10, in my opinion. It is a poem. In the poem, 2 punk kids make a blood pact and then kill people. That's the story. Same issues with poetic style that I've talked about before, but I did like the plot, even though it was very simple. I think in this case, simple was good. I maybe would have appreciated a little more like intense violence, but in this instance, I think that would have done wonders for the story. But overall, it was pretty good for what it was. It was fine. The next story is called The Bliss Point. It is a 5 out of 10. In the story, there are hedonistic churches and forced orgasms, and that's really all I can make of the plot in a short sentence. The main character's arc is a bit rushed toward the end. The final scene, I found it to be a bit lackluster and really edgy for edge's sake. There's a really violent part of the ending that just doesn't make much sense. Kind of felt like the White was going for a martyrs thing, like skin removal stuff, but doesn't make much sense. Overall, I thought it was fine. The next story is called Horse. It's an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed this one. In the story, a new drug takes addiction epidemics to new heights. I thought it was great. I thought it ended too soon. I would absolutely have read an entire novel based on this plot, but it was pretty fucking good. I liked it. The next story is called The Devil in the River. I gave it a 1 out of 10, and it is a poem. In the story, a kid sees a river monster, and it's like an allusion to pollution. Maybe. It started fine. It's another poem that quickly became the things that I dislike about his poetry, the author's poetry. The next story is called Screams in Bobby's Eyes. I gave it a 9 out of 10. In the story, there's a kid in a friend group who is a serial killer. It's a poem, and I really did like this one. There was some of the poetic technique in this that I disliked about his other poetry, but overall I kind of thought it was toned down a little bit, and in a couple of instances I did think it worked quite well for the benefit of the plot, so I really did enjoy this one. The next story is called Eating with Mama. It is a 6 out of 10. It is a poem, and it's about monsters, I think. Monsters, I think is the implication. Eating people, maybe they're werewolves, I'm not entirely sure. It's another ending in this one that doesn't make much sense. There are like 3 or 4 different ways you could interpret it, and we're not exactly dealing with fucking Tolstoy, so, I don't necessarily think that was intentional. I think there's one way that you should interpret it, but I don't know which it is. So, overall, the story was fine. And the last story is titled Big Brother. No idea what the fuck that story title means in context with the story. I kept reading and kept thinking about like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. I have no fucking idea. I gave it a 6 out of 10. In the story, a guy with a really big deformed cock turns to death rape because he can. The story was good. However, at the end, it did really go off the deep end in a way that ruined some of the enjoyment I was feeling. The last event leading up to the ending, the last extreme event leading up to the ending was just really weird. So, that is your spoiler-free review, blurbs, whatever. We're going to get into intense spoilers. I'm going to go through these stories again with a fine-toothed comb. I'm going to explain certain passages in context for some of the things that I've already said. Some of these stories, I'm not going to have anything else to say, so we'll just skim past them, but I'm not going to fucking waste your time by saying everything I've already said twice. So I'm not going to do you a disservice by not expanding upon some of these things. And if I can't expand, we're just going to move past it. We're going to start off again with Beast Mode. Now, I said it was just another zombie story. and I truly mean that. The twist is that we're following a guy working out. So instead of in the back of the comic or the back of the episode watching Michonne do pull-ups and push-ups and who is it? Merle makes a comment about staying fit or whatever. No, this story we follow that in its entirety. We follow a person getting fit to survive the zombie apocalypse. It was fine. It was a perfectly fine, serviceable zombie story. It was not extreme at all, really. It was gory, sure, but it's a zombie story. And yeah, it's pretty fucking much it. So yeah, that was a 5 out of 10. As I said, 99 Cent, I gave that a 3 out of 10, I believe. In the story, there's a guy. Girlfriend broke up with him, all right? And he's out drunk with his buddies. There's a homeless woman across the street. Walks up to her. She says something about $1 on a sign, all right? And he's like, what would you do for 99 cents? And she says, I'll kill for you. And he's like, kill my bitch ex-girlfriend. He doesn't give her his name. She doesn't give her name or his name or addresses or anything. And then the next day, police show up at his door. Hey, your fucking ex-girlfriend was mutilated and murdered. All right. This fucking homeless woman shows up in the back of his car and is telling him, you got to tell me a name every day. Otherwise, it's going to be really bad for you. Sure. He talks to his friend who was with him that night. His friend says there was no one across the street. There was no one there. Okay. And then he shows up randomly at the place where he found the woman to begin with, and there's police tape around, and he sees her body, the homeless woman's body, at the place where he originally saw her. So I guess the implication is that it is her spirit or demon or whatever, demonic spirit, and she was dead the entire time, except her body was right where he was the first night. So I don't know how the fuck he or his friends didn't see her. But she's also like mutilated, so maybe the implication is that she's continuing that kind of violence, or maybe there's another thing that I'm missing where it's I really don't fucking know. I read a couple of reviews. One of them said the exact same thing, that they were kind of weirded out by that ending because there's some conclusions you can draw, and it doesn't totally make sense depending on which one you draw. And the story itself was just really fucking meh. So, you know. That was a 3 out of 10. Krokodil fights, 7 out of 10. I really did enjoy the violent horror poetry. I dig that shit so much. I like the plot, even though it was short. There was some cool pacing via enjambment in this one. I will read to you a line on page 51. I read this one out loud because I was reading to my partner. My opponent dug a thumb into my eye. It squished and squirmed. Blue-white light flashed. White-hot agony. So there's an enjambment. The line shifts at white-hot agony. And if you're reading it out loud, that gives a really cool effect. You know, blue-white light flashed. White-hot agony. I thought that pacing worked really well. There's a couple of things like that in that poem specifically. There was one instance where I felt it was a bit too over-detailed. He used too many nouns with adjectives back to back, and it just kind of sounded a little much. And then, yeah, everything I said before about the constant repetition. So, yeah, that was a 7 out of 10. Overall, I really did like it. Next story, first-person shooter. There are two guys. They're out. They're in a ghetto. They live in a ghetto. They're out, and they are beating kids up for their candy. They're jumping kids for their candy bags. Whatever. They're being degenerates. They end up at this guy's arcade, and the guy, people make rumors about him being like a demon, or the devil himself. So, and he's really weird. He's creepy. The guy introduces them to this new game, which is a VR game with weapons. So think like a fucking deer hunting game with a detachable rifle, but with a bunch of different fucking weapons, and you have VR goggles on. I didn't really understand the logistics of that, but it's a supernatural thing anyway, so it doesn't really fucking matter. And they get into this game, they start killing people and raping them, and all this awful, heinous shit. It's good. It's gory. It's fine. It's not, there's no substance to it, but it's cool. We spend the story hinting that what they're experiencing is real. Right? At one point, the fucking kid manages to switch with someone's weapon like that they drop in the game, which obviously you can't fucking do if the weapons are all tactile. That doesn't make any sense. So he's also like starts smelling things and feeling the heat in the air, that kind of shit. So we're absolutely we're inferring here that this is real, that in some way this is real. Okay. They remove the goggles, and for a second they're still in the game as well. But they remove the goggles and are swarmed by police immediately. And there's blood on the weapons around them that they've had. There's like a melee, like again, melee weapons and stuff connected to the machine. Don't understand the fucking logistics of that at all, but whatever. So the implication here is, okay, this was real. Throughout the story, some of the characters looked like people in the real neighborhood. Some of the locations looked like places in the real neighborhood. It's definitely real, right? So in some weird way, they were actually out there killing people. It doesn't really make much sense, but it doesn't have to. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. They turn around and they see the fucking creepy arcade owner. And next to him is the last kid that they jumped. And he's staring at them, like death staring at them. And he's like, this is what you fucking get, is the implication. Okay? And at the beginning of the game, they could choose from a bunch of different locations. There was a school. There was the ghetto, which is the one they selected. I think there was a mall. And then there was the police station. And then there's a line on page 72, which just irked me a lot. It kind of pissed me off because we go from, this doesn't make much sense, but it's supernatural bullshit. It's okay. They were actually killing people. Whatever. And then we get this line. It was then that Marshall, one of the kids who was playing the video game, remembered that one of the locations in the video game had been a police station. The kid, the one standing next to the arcade owner, smiled at him as if reading his mind. And then I'm like, what the fuck? What does that mean? What are you implying by that? Are the police in-game police? Is that what you're implying? That they're somehow in the real world, but also still in the game? So they were committing crimes in the game, kind of in real life as well. And these police are game police? Like they're police that came out of the game? Is that what the implication is? Because that's literally the only thing I could think of that made any sense. I had another person read it, and they had no fucking idea what this line was supposed to be implying. So why are you drawing attention to the police station in the video game that they didn't even choose to play at? I don't know. It went from, this is weird, but it's fine because it's supernatural bullshit, to you are implying something because you have an idea of what all of this actually means, but you're not telling me, and the line that you are using to imply it makes no fucking sense in context. I really don't fucking know. I could be completely stupid, but I had somebody else who I really trust to be very good at analyzing literature read this as well, because I was fucking flabbergasted, and they were like, yeah, I have no fucking idea what that line is supposed to mean, and it doesn't make much sense. So, all right. Next story, 7 years. So this guy, he was a gangster 7 years ago, but now he's reformed. He's in a good university in a nice town, and he's walking down the street remembering all of his exploits when he was a gangster, and he's being followed by a guy, and he knows from his experience that this guy is he's this guy's mark. This guy's trying to kill him, and he gets cornered in the alleyway, and he finds out that the guy is his self from 7 years ago. And then there's a weird, like, parallel between that and you lose all your cells every 7 years, even though that makes, even in context, that really doesn't make any sense, because it's not like you lose all of those cells at once. So, it's just, like, the story is just trying to be, from what I can tell, the story is just trying to be deep about, like, youth in, like ghettos or urban areas, very bad urban areas, being self-destructive. The line that's repeated is dead or in prison numerous times. It doesn't come off very well. It just seems really fake deep to me. And yeah, there's really nothing more to say about that. It really does nothing for me. Ecstasy of Agony. Do I have anything else to say about this? No, I do not at all. Okay, so we're going to just go right past that. Big Game Hunter. This story had one of the issues that I actually talked about when I reviewed The Bug Collector. There's an instance where the narrator, says something that's really tonally inappropriate, says something that's almost humorous, and uh, but it comes off as like really cringe. But it's I think it's supposed to be humorous, and it just falls flat. It fell flat in The Bug Collector when it was more of a thought from the narrator talking about how he was about to go full Karen on her, and then there were a couple of lines of dialogue between the narrator and the woman who had him tied up that were just really tonally off. And again, it just really does seem like it's an attempt at dark humor, and it just does not work. It just completely took me out of the story because the rest of the story was not like that. So in this story specifically, it kind of works a little better because the narrator is completely insane and thinks that what he's doing, which is hunting bears, by the way, big gay men, he thinks that what he's doing is okay and comparable to something like BDSM, but it's still the things that he says are really weird. Like, oh, you're kink shaming me, like that kind of shit. It took me out of the story completely. Yeah, that's overall, I really did enjoy this one, though it's fucking absolutely insane. And I did enjoy that, so I rated that a 7 out of 10. Let's see. The next story is Unsolicited. So this guy, pretty much what I told you in the blurb, he sends some pictures of himself to a girl, and then the girl invites him over, and then she and her friend start leading him further into the house, and then he realizes that they're serial killers, they're manhunters, and he sees a bunch of destroyed bodies all around, and then they bite his dick off and start chewing on his testicles and stuff, and then he dies, or it's implied that he dies. Specifically, in regards to the genital mutilation, it felt a little flat for me. There was a lot of violence, and some of it really did land, but I would have appreciated a little more sensory detail in terms of the genital mutilation. And there's also, this is a reoccurring thing that I noticed, there's a preachy, like, paragraph describing the actions of the protagonist and the reason they are the way they are, that kind of stuff, and it just... It's very preachy. Like, oh, if he had known better and been more self-reflective, he would have realized that what he was doing amounted to digital rape, like that kind of shit. And it's just a full paragraph of that kind of stuff. And it just, I get that you're trying to flesh out the character a little more internally, but it does come off as really preachy and just unnecessary. I think there are way better ways to do that, to get that idea across than just saying that kind of thing. So I rated that a 6 out of 10. And then we have Blood-Soaked Savior. This story is about a person whose wife, who was working at a restaurant during the coronavirus pandemic, gets infected and dies because of one of her customers who wasn't wearing a mask, wasn't social distancing, whatever. And then he sees a guy, I think it's in a supermarket or a grocery store or something, and he's not wearing a mask, and he's harassing the staff. And so our protagonist, in all of his poetic glory, talks about how he will be this man's blood-soaked savior, because even though if he takes a couple of hours to torture him to death for his crimes, it will still be more merciful than the death that his wife or fiance or whatever, or girlfriend, had, coughing to death, unable to breathe, surrounded by loved ones. He thinks this will be better, so he's the blood-soaked savior. It really reads like an edgy story you'd expect from some terminally online wannabe socialist, some like 14-year-old who's heard the word socialism and likes the general idea, but actually has no idea about like politics at all. Kind of like the inverse. If you've ever read one of those really edgy posts from someone who like frequents 4chan and is like very right-wing, very racially intolerant, misogynist, homophobic, that kind of thing, and they'll write, I don't know, fanfic manifestos about like killing gay people. That's kind of like what this reads as, but like the inverse with poetry that I really dislike on top of it. I personally don't think I would have minded the story as much if it was fleshed out better, but also it was so politically edgy just because it kind of seemed like. So that was a 0 out of 10. Blue and Red, I give a 1 out of 10. There's a couple of guys, and one's black, one's white. They're constantly at each other's throats because the white guy's a Republican. I think he's from the South. The black guy is not a Republican. He's from the city. And there's something in the air after the president, Trump, bombs North Korea, and then North Korea bombs the United States or does something to the United States or whatever with a chemical agent, if I'm remembering correctly. And so everyone turns into like these fucking mutants. And then the mutants are implied to be like a lookalike of Donald Trump. Like they're big, they're fat, they're orange, they have weird hair, they have heart attacks if they run too long. So it's implied to be like they're lookalikes of Donald Trump. And the book is literally just these two guys at each other's throats for their political beliefs. And then the book does some stuff towards the end, drawing attention to the political infighting in our country, and it falls flat because it comes right after a guy, the Democrat, proves the Republican wrong about these things not looking like Trump, and he shoots what I guess is implied to be actually Trump mutated, maybe. And then there's the fucking whole thing about, well, maybe we shouldn't be infighting like this. It's less edgy, but it was so nothing and just not good. Not good. So yeah, 1 out of 10 for that. Punk rock revenge porn. I don't have anything else to say about that. That was, 5 out of 10. Okay, Bliss Point. There's a church where they preach sinning as much as possible because determinism, very Calvinistic determinism, like God made you do all these things, God makes you sin, Jesus died for all of our sins, so as long as you accept Jesus in your heart before you die, you'll go to heaven, so why would we not sin? And moreover, sinning is what God intends us to do, so we should sin. Fine concept, sure. Very bloody. Orgies kind of reminded me a little bit of The Night Stalkers by Christopher Triana. Our protagonist is there, and she's not part of this church, and she watches her friends get beat to death and then raped, and then the leader of the church takes her to a back room and tries to do some, like, Martyr from 2008-esque shit where he stimulates her to the point where she's having constant orgasms in order to see the face of God, and then towards the end, he starts skinning one of her breasts out of nowhere. Again, strikes me as an attempt to kind of take some details from Martyrs. And the protagonist at one point switches from not liking it to liking it because she's reached the bliss point, and it seems very jarring, and I think it could have been done a little better. And also the skinning scene made not very much sense. I mean, I guess it didn't really need to make very much sense, but it just felt off for the story, for that ending. It just felt a little weird. Yeah, I gave that a 5 out of 10. Horse. There's a new drug called Horse after the Horsemen of the Apocalypse of War, War. And taking it makes you go fucking nuts and you start killing people who you are prejudiced against. And overall, I thought it was good. I thought it was fine. See, this is a story where you could absolutely talk about the infighting between religious groups and political groups and racial groups, whatever. I think that would have worked perfectly in this kind of story, and it did in the limited time that we had with it. It worked pretty good. The violence was good. It was all there. It was great, and it ended way too soon. And I was like, what the fuck, man? I would have read a whole fucking book about this. Or even if you just, like, gave me a more definitive ending or maybe just a couple more pages. I don't know. I just felt like it ended too soon, but I really did enjoy it. There's also another kind of preachy scene. It's a little better in this one. It's about, like, he talks about how one of the characters was doomed ever since he had his first joint, and then the next paragraph we get talking about how that's not to say that marijuana is a gateway drug or whatever. It's just that his life was fucked up, and then we go into all of his escapades. It's just like I think there are better ways to do that. They don't come off as so preachy. But overall, I thought the story was actually really, really good. So that was an 8 out of 10. The Devil in the River, I have literally nothing else to say about that. That was a 1 out of 10. The Screams in Bobby's Eyes. Yeah, nothing else to say about that one either. That was a 9 out of 10. Eating with Mama. Okay. So this kid lives with his mom and his sister, and they eat people. And there's a line about, like, he's from a race that used to run wild with their paws in the dirt. So maybe the implication is they're shapeshifters or werewolves or something. I don't know. I don't know if they're actually human at all. But this kid does not want to eat humans, and his mom tells him that if he doesn't, whatever the curse is, whatever the disease is, it will eat him from the inside out. And so he doesn't eat humans, and then he starts eating himself. He eats his arms and his hands or whatever. And then he says, but now I would feed those nearest to me. I would feed mama. I would feed sister. I would feed the thing in all of us. The hunger gone, the pain gone, the peace, the peace. And again, I don't really know what that is supposed to mean. I don't know if that means that he's changed because he's eaten parts of himself. So now he's going to engage in the eating process and the catching of humans process. I don't know if that means he's literally going to feed them with his body. That's what I interpret it as, but that doesn't make much sense unless they literally are werewolves, and the implication is that he's going to regrow the parts of him that he ate off, but there's no mention of that. It seems like the things that he eats, his hands and his fingers and parts of his arms up to the elbows, like, are gone. So I don't know how he would feed those nearest to him if they don't regenerate. So I have really no idea what the actual implication there is. There are a couple of other things that I'm thinking that are like real stretches, but those are my two best ideas, and neither of them really makes much sense in context, at least to me. Again, maybe I'm a fucking idiot. Put it in the comments. I don't know, man. Oh, what was that one? I was fucking eating with mama. Yeah, that was a 6 out of 10. And then we have Big Brother. Big dude. Big cock. Like, horrifically deformed. Like elephantiasis or whatever the disease is, but not quite. Like 3 feet long. Flaccid. And, yeah, he starts fucking people to death. And then at the end, he's fucking this couple, or he's fucking this wife specifically, and the wife's husband is there, and the husband's like a cuck, a subordinate, or not a subordinate, a sub, and he sticks his dick in her, and then randomly it's revealed that she has vaginal teeth, which is, he uses the scientific term for that, even though there's never, as far as I know, been a confirmed case of that being real, especially not in the case like it's described in this book, where she has a tongue, too. And then he fucks her to death after she tries to bite his dick off. Again, out of the blue, this girl's got like a sci-fi deformity. And, well, I guess he does also have a deformity. I don't know if that's meant to be a parallel being drawn. I don't think so. I could be wrong. And then a Serbian film style, like, cock kills her. Like, he shoves his cock up through all of her organs and bones, and I think out through her mouth, killing her, like, skewering her with his cock. It went off the deep end a little bit and was a bit too much for me, and kind of took out some of the enjoyment I was having in the story. Yeah, that was a 6 out of 10. And is that it? I think that's it. Holy fuck, I've been recording for 50 minutes. Oh my fucking god. All right. You know, I recorded that Tender of the Flesh video. It took me 45 minutes to record that. I got that video down to 25 minutes. I don't think I have much to cut out of this video. Fuck. All right, yeah, that's about it for this video. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I read all of my comments. As always, my opinions are my opinions and my opinions alone, especially since I was very negative about some of the things in this book. Go read the book for yourself, prove me wrong, form your own opinions, what have you. Always good. I'd recommend you go read The Ecstasy of Agony by Wrath James White. I will leave a link in the description, as I always do, to where you can buy it. Is that it? Yeah, I think that is. All right, my friends, be calm, be smart, and go with love. See ya.